Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodho Bhidiyate. Previous verse, which asks the question, what is this? What is involved to undertake a discernment or a discriminative inquiry pertaining to reality? Because this is reality. Welcome to reality. Every day we wake up in reality, we experience reality, we talk about reality, we kind of cry around reality. It's just reality constantly. And this reality is what is being questioned. We have to know, what is this reality that we are speaking of, experiencing, and trying to figure out. So we need to discover this. And it starts out by asking the question, what is involved to undertake or to begin a discriminative inquiry? And the very first process is, it says that you are the final truth, and everything else other than you is mithya. And so the question arises: what does it mean to say that I am the final truth and everything else is mithya? Because it sort of almost contradicts reality. Because if we say that there's only one without a second, this is how Advaita starts, there's only one without a second, then how can you say that I am the truth and everything else other than me is other than me? So it's mithya. So how can you say that? That sort of introduces two realities here. And so we have to firstly understand what is this I before we undertake everything else. So the way that this book works is we first look at Atma, we'll first look at you, the subject, and then we will later look at everything else, the objects. So later on we will see mithya and this world. So this means we have to also explain away the world. You cannot just sort of say, I am the final truth, I am the final reality, and everything else is mithya. Then the question is going to arise sooner or later. Yeah, but then where's the peace of mind? Where do I get peace of mind in that kind of thinking? Because we are constantly surrounded by objects. So those objects also have to be accounted for. But for now, we are just accounting self, Atma. And what do we say? So we said that Atma is the final independent. So what does this mean? If you look at your own experience, just like a thought, you have a thought, like a certain thought, and then another thought comes. And that thought that comes is totally unrelated to the previous thought. It's like two different things. One of them is maybe a memory from when you were a child. And then another thought is of a barking dog, or maybe a neighbor that is playing loud music. And these two thoughts have no connection whatsoever. And even in between, there is no thought. There is just that space of silence, that sense of no thought. So in and through, so according to the verse, when it says that you are the final independent, the final truth, that means the truth which does not depend on anything else. It is the foundation for everything. All that really means in reference to your thoughts is that you survive, this Atma survives every thought. So you could have a thought that is, for example, the neighbor, and that thought, you were there before that thought arose, and that thought is also going to last for a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. and you're there while the thought is going on, and you survive even when the thought goes away, which means that if your nature was placed in your thoughts, then by definition, by the time your thoughts go away, then you would go away too with them. And therefore, there will be no one else there no one left to say that my thoughts have gone. So something remains despite thoughts having a different nature and coming and going. And this something it's not a something, it's Atma, it's you. and therefore, it by definition is that which cannot be negated, which means that even if a thought comes, and suppose you say, well, fine, I am not my thought, but I am the absence of thoughts. This is again, in our experience, not true, because even if you have silence, there's just silence, and you're just having no thoughts whatsoever. It's just silence. And so that means that when thought comes and silence is displaced by a thought, then by definition, again, you should be displaced right along with the silence. So even you cannot say that you are silence, but that is not true, because you are not displaced whether there is a thought or whether there is silence. So this Atma, by definition, is therefore the final independent, which doesn't depend on anything for its existence. It is the final self-existing on which everything else depends upon. And therefore, the book now wants to go further and say, okay, so far, all we know about Atma is that it is the final independent, it is the final truth, and everything else is mithya. Everything else is mithya. We will cover that later. But for now, what else is Atma? Because this is not enough information. We need something else to grasp. We need something concrete to understand who we are. And that is where the next verse comes, and it wants to say, Atma kaha sthula sukshma karana sharirat vyatiriktaha panchakosha atitaha san avastha traya sakshi sat chit ananda swarupaha san yastishtati sa atma. So as you can see, it says, what is Atma? Who or what is Atma? It doesn't matter if it's a who or a what, but what is the nature of Atma? Atma is distinct from your three bodies. So it is distinct from your gross body, it's distinct from your mind, and it's distinct from your causal body. This will be explained later. It is also distinct from the five covers. Now, see, when it says covers, you see, nothing actually covers Atma, because nothing enjoys the same order of reality as Atma. But when we put our I into one of these five points of error, like your physiological functions, and you say, I am hungry, and I am my circulation is ill, and so we say I am ill. Or my digestive system is weak, so we say I'm no longer digesting, my metabolism is no longer like it used to be. And so we take on the functions of our physiology, and we identify with that, and we say, oh, once upon a time, I used to be so physically flexible, and I used to digest my food, and I could eat pies and cakes and pizzas and not gain any weight. And now look at me, I take have a chocolate, and next morning I've gained 10 kilograms. And so we kind of take that to the offense. And so that's sort of as though becomes a cover onto yourself. But it actually doesn't cover at all. But due to this association, it seems to cover. And then it says, Sakshi, I am the knower, the witness of the three states, the presence in whose presence the three states are an object. I am, and then Satchidananda Swarupa. This is the direct definition of who you are. So, and then therefore, Sa Atma, that is Atma. Okay. So let's just look at these words a little bit closer, and we'll just look at them one by one so that we're all on the same page. So first of all, let's ask the question, what does it mean to, a person who is yet to recognize who they are? Someone is just kind of figuring the things out and they want to know the truth, but they don't know the truth. See, we call this one with ignorance, right? Ignorance regarding who they are. But then what does it mean to say, I don't know who I am? What does it mean to say that, I don't quite, I mix myself up with the body or the mind? What does it mean to be ignorant? And the answer is, in fact, the question had the answer already inside. It means to mix two things together. And so therefore, we say, as I said, this physiology example, I mix mithya onto satyam. Therefore, satyam, becomes mithya as though. And if I were to demonstrate this, just a simple example. So here we have plastic. And the plastic can be, just through an analogy, can be called satyam. It means it is always, it's the truth of this form. It's always obtaining through this form. And mithya would be kind of like the walls and, anything that's changing right now, right? It's changing. You can say the form is constantly changing. But while the form is changing, what's obtaining through and through the entirety of that form? The same plastic. The plastic is not going anywhere. So when we say ignorance, all that really means is that the truth of this form is the plastic. However, suppose this was alive, right? The eye of this fella is placed in the changing form. So now they say, I am upright. And then when they get older, they're like this. They're like, flabby and so on. So there's this mix-up. So the content of oneself, the content is always through and through any kind of changing form. But the error is placing the I in the changes, and thereby missing out on the content which obtains through and through every single change. And the content is always going to be you. It cannot be anything other than you. And therefore, what he wants to say is, Atma, right? You are other than that which undergoes this sort of modification all lifelong. Right? From starting with your body, starting with your emotions, starting with your sense of who you are, sense of your accomplishments, sense of your worth, sense of your unworth, sense of your roles, like I'm a parent, I am a son, I am a daughter, I'm a father in reference to my son, but I am a son in reference to my father. I am 55, I am 60, I am 20. So like so many, right, roles that we can put. And all of these roles are, they're mithya. They're just kind of, they're just changing roles pertaining to the person. So what is the truth? What is the nature of this form? Not this form, but what is the nature of the content? What is the nature of Atma? What is the nature of you? And then it says it is Sat Chit Ananda. So to understand these three words, just think of it as, in order to understand anything, it doesn't matter Satchidananda, just never mind Satchidananda right now. Imagine I want to explain to you the moon, right? And there's a lot of objects right now that are round. And I just say to you one word, I say round, and I just say round. Are you possibly going to connect that to the moon? No way. There's so many objects in this world that are round. There's a round stone. There's a round beetle, right? There's many round objects in this world. But then I say to you, round and reflective. Now, you're kind of like, what do you mean? But suppose I say that in the right context. Suppose I say that at night. That's going to take a lot less effort to figure out than if I say it out of context and I say that during the day. So you say, oh, round and reflective, the moon, right? But suppose you still need one extra word to kind of understand what I'm talking about. And I say round, reflective sky. And it's the night. Suppose it's the nighttime. Instantly say, moon, no problems whatsoever. So what this means is that everyone, depending on our sharpness, how sharp we are, right? It depends. Some people just need one single explanation to end the journey, to not end the journey, but to understand the nature of who they are, to understand what is this all about. Some of us need 2 words. Some of us need 10,000 words, right? So this is, so when it comes to understanding who you are, the rishis, they've figured out that the minimum words to understand your nature is 3 words. And they're the absolute best words that we have that directly point to your true nature. In this case, it is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, which we will see what they are later. So far, suppose we're doing this inquiry from the beginning, and we're all beginners, right? It's maybe good to have a beginner's mind once in a while. And we say the question, who are you? And we say, oh, I am so-and-so. I am a professor, I'm a teacher, I'm a employer, I'm an employee, I am a father, a son, a mom, or dad. And we say, that is all true. I mean, Atma is all of that. You can't say that Atma is not all of that, because we said that, right? Atma is the truth of all things. So yes, Atma is the father, Atma is the mother, Atma is the roles that you play, but at the same time, Atma is not bound by any of those roles. So what does this mean? If you take, for example, like an actor, right? An actor. And this actor is playing 3 roles. And the beggar, the mom, and the king. Okay, the beggar, the mom, and the king. So see, suppose these actors, right? They all depend on, suppose these roles, they're all 3 roles, the beggar, the mom, and the king. They're all 3 roles, distinct roles. And they all require the presence of the actor, right? So wherever you have the role, wherever you have the mom, you have the actor. Wherever you have the king, you have the actor. Wherever we have the other one that I said, we have the actor, right? So all of this is why it's, sometimes whatever I said, right? All 3 of them require the actor. So it's not like you say now, the actor is not the mom, the actor is not the king, the actor is not the beggar, right? That's actually inaccurate. You understand? The actor is the king. while the king, because the actor is the king, the actor is the beggar, the actor is the mom, but at the same time, the actor is free of all three roles, even while taking on the roles. You understand the subtle difference? So again, I want to go back. It's not correct. It's strictly not correct to say that Atma is not the tree. You are not the world. You are not the sun. Because we hear these statements, right? But that is strictly incorrect. Atma is the truth of everything, but at the same time, Atma is not bound by any one thing. Were it to be bound, then by definition, like the actor, one could never change roles. One would be constantly stuck to one single sort of reality in their experience. It will be like, like how do they use in the Upanishads? Suppose that you were not free of whatever forms are there. Suppose you were not free. That means that if you had a thought, then that thought would be in your mind for the rest of your life. It would be there all the time, while dreaming, while meditating, while in deep sleep. It's like get this out, and it will just not go away. However, in our experience, this is absolutely not the case. We are not experiencing anything that is just constantly stuck in our experience. There's always a freshness, right? Kind of accommodating a new experience. There's a freshness accommodating a new time that we go through, and this freshness is what this Atma is, this you. So the formula, if you were to put this into a little formula, it would be that yes, the objects, in this case, the roles are the actor, right? But the actor is never the roles. In that same way, objects, everything in this world is you, but you are free. You are not any of these objects simultaneously. So everything is you, depends upon you, but you are neither of these objects. That means you are not your life. You're not your, your concerns. You're not your joys. You're not your your merits, your demerits. You've got no track record. You've got zero track record by definition, because track record, like all of the good things I've done and all of the sort of wise things I've said, none of that belongs to you, because that too is an object which does depend upon you, but you are free of that object. For now, you don't have to worry about, yeah, but how is this object me? That is going to come later. You don't have to worry about it. For now, we're just analyzing the subject, you, Atma. Okay? And then it uses the new word here, sakshi. Sakshi. You heard this word, sakshi? Okay. See, whenever we introduce new words, there's a danger there at that point, because it's almost like adding more confusion. It's like, why now add this witness, or, sakshi means witness or subject. Why add subject and witness? And it's just unnecessary. Why not just stick with Atma? The reason is because grammatically, we can't say, it says here, who are you? Who is Atma? It says, the witness, I am the witness of the three states. So Atma is the witness, the sakshi of the three states, the presence, right, in which the three states obtain. So grammatically, you can't say who is Atma. It will sound like this: who am I? I am the I of the three states. It doesn't make sense. Who am I? I am the I of the three states. Therefore, you say, who am I? I am the witness of the three states. You understand? So it's just a grammatical thing that due to grammar, due to our language constraints, we have to use the right words so it doesn't sound strange. So you can't say, I am the I of the three states. It doesn't make sense. So we just say I am the subject, in reference to the three states, which are the waking, the dreaming, and the deep sleep. You understand this? I am the subject in reference to these three states. One step better is to say subject. I am the subject, and these three states are the objects in reference to me, the subject. But now let's look at this word subject, right? Because it's actually a valid methodology. In Vedanta, we have a methodology, and one of the methodologies is we start out on the very basic level, a subject and object, right? And so it just means that everything in reality can be divided into two things. There's you, the subject, and there is everything else other than you. There's an object. Okay, very simple. So now you're probably going to say, well, wait a minute. Now you just said there is me, Atma, Satyam, and everything else is a Mithya object. And now you're saying I am the subject and everything else is an object. It's the same thing. For now, it's just another model. It's just another model we're bringing in. So the model is you are the subject and everything else is an object. And how to explain this? It's very simple. You look at an object in the distance, and we look at this cup, and we say the cup is what? It's an object, right? And then we say, the shirt is an object, and then we go closer, and we close our eyes, and we get a sense of our body, and we say, yeah, what is your body? Right? Well, my body is my body. But the question is, so that means that your body is other than you, right? Because the body is an object, just like this cup. You understand this? The body is an object, just like anything else. And then you say, there's a thought, right? You have a thought. And then you say, well, my thought is also an object. It's an object. It's an object known to the subject. But then you say, but who is the subject? Well, who is the subject? The subject is the one to whom the object is known, right? Whoever the subject is, I don't know who the subject is. Do I even know who the subject is? Do I even care who the subject is? No, the subject is whoever, to whomever the object is known, to that one is the subject. You understand? To whomever this cup is known, right? You don't have to say it's known to me. What's the point? Okay, it's pretty obvious it's known to you, but you don't even have to say that. To whom is this cup known? Yeah, it's known to whomever it's known. Right? And the cup is known, right? Like, who is the subject? Oh, the subject is, it's Sat, Chit, Ananda. It is other than three bodies, other than five states. It's like, why do all of that? It's just like, who is the subject? Who is this I? This I is whoever is other than this cup. That's what the I is. That's what the subject is. Whoever is other than this cup is the subject, is the I. Now, I don't know who this I is. I don't have to know who this I is. I don't want to know who this I is, because it's pretty obvious that the I is there, that the subject is there. And why is it obvious that the subject is there? Because the cup is. The cup is here. I know about the cup. Now, who is this I that knows about the cup? I don't care. The fact is, the cup is known. By whom? Again, I don't want to know who that one is. The fact is, the cup is known. You understand? This is called negation. Instead of wanting to know about the subject, you just understand, in the presence of that one, whoever that one is, objects become evident. Objects are evident. Why are objects evident? Because the objects are evident in the presence of that one who is not the object, in that one who is other than the object. And that one we call the Sakshi, we call the subject, we call the I, right? The Atma. So it's very simple to, if you look at it, just kind of break it down and not complicate these things with these words, okay? So is this clear? Sakshi. Vedanta has models. Vedanta is just really a series of models. Models are used to help us to see realities, to understand realities. So if you can see Vedanta as a model, like a series of proven time-tested models, then it really starts to make sense. It's not sort of taken as it's not taken as an intellectual academic pursuit. It's just taken as something to use and go through. And if it's not working for you, then Vedanta has other models. So sometimes one model will work for someone, another model will work for someone else. And therefore, in this manner, we have one more model to explain this Atma. Who is Atma? Okay, so the topic is Atma Kaha. Who and what is Atma? And so far, we have said that Atma is other than the object, the one in whose presence objects take place, the one in whose presence objects come to be, right? Objects are identified. But there's another way to say this. If you listen to my language carefully, I've deliberately restricted some words because I want to unfold this very slowly. So we said, who or what are you? What is your truth? What is your nature? And so far I have said Atma is that one who is other than an object. But there's a different way you can say that. Atma is the one by whom knowledge of objects takes place. Knowledge of objects takes place. So again, I want to bring this cup and just to show you something. See, I brought this cup over, and now this cup is an object, obviously object to you. And but what's in Vedanta, we say this is a object of knowledge. Now, there's a slight confusion when we say this object of knowledge. I'll take something else. This container is an object of knowledge, obviously to Atma. It's an object of knowledge to Atma. In the presence of you, this is an object of knowledge. What this means specifically, object of knowledge, is that I don't mean as in information. When I say the word, this is not information, because often we confuse the word knowledge with sort of, information about the container. So when I say this is an object of knowledge, I don't mean like, you see this container, how it has, it's round and, it's made up of so-and-so, it's constructed by this. So that is not what I mean. I mean specifically in the presence of you, in the presence of Atma, knowledge takes place. What do you mean knowledge takes place? Knowledge of whatever we show, whatever comes in the presence of Atma, knowledge of that takes place. Now, the problem with this word is that because we have such a strong association with this knowledge and information, some people will say, like, so what? My nature is that one who gives knowledge to objects, right? That's what Atma is. You give knowledge to objects. Does that sound confusing when I say that? Like, sort of, I give knowledge to objects. You're like, what do you mean I give knowledge? Well, what I really mean is, in the presence of you, knowledge takes place. That means without you, there could be no knowledge of this container. Without your presence, knowledge of whatever this object is, doesn't matter if it's contained, knowledge of this container could not take place. But then still, you're kind of confused. It's like, but what do you mean knowledge? Do you have a different word for this? A word that I can relate? And it turns out, yes, we do. So to avoid the problem of confusing the word knowledge with information, we have two new words, and they are awareness and consciousness. So if I say to you now, this is an object of your awareness, do you have a different understanding? Do you have a different sense when I say that? This is an object of knowledge. And if I now say, this is an object of your consciousness, this is an object of awareness. In your awareness, this object is taking place. In your awareness, by your awareness, this object is known, right? This object is identified. Because of awareness, because of my awareness, because of your awareness, this object is present. It's a known object. Yeah. Or sometimes we can also see these two words, because some of us, we sort of, we prefer another word, and we have consciousness. So we can also say, in the presence of my consciousness, in the presence of consciousness, this object is there's consciousness of this object. In the presence of my consciousness, this object is an object. Its object exists. In the presence of my awareness, this cup exists. In the presence of my awareness, this pen exists. In the presence of my awareness, this mouse exists. So, in the presence of my awareness, time exists. Because if you remember, we also did an analysis last week, and I said, if you go down the line, if you analyze anything, you will say that you can negate any object, right? Like the wood. If you look deeper into it, it's cellulose and molecules and particles and so on. But all along the line, there's two constants that remain, and that is I, right? The subject, and also time. And then we have to now get rid of time, because the verse said that you are the final truth and everything else, including time, depends upon you. And then we did a little experiment and we said, well, we can negate time. Easy. Because we all had an experience where we said I lost track of time. I lost track of time. Time no longer had an effect on me. I no longer had a sense or understanding or awareness of time. But during that moment, what did you have an awareness of? Yourself. You understand? So you never went away, but even a sense of time, or the concept of time, or or your understanding of time, or your postulation of time, that too was able to go away. But there was only one principle that didn't go away, and that is Atma, that is you. So by this understanding, we can see that even time requires the presence of you, the foundation being Satyam. Okay. So far we have said Atma is now we can say Atma is the awareness. See, much better word than Sakshi. Atma is the awareness of the three states. That means awareness of the waker, awareness of the dreamer, and awareness of the deep sleeper. Instead of saying sort of the witness and the subject and all of these words, they have their part. Please understand this. They have their part, but eventually they did their work, and we need to put them away so we can move on to some other kind of, understanding, some other explanations. So let's not get caught up in these words as we start to build up our understanding. Okay, so we have said that Atma is the awareness of the three states. We have said that Atma is the knowledge principle, that one in whose presence knowledge of objects takes place. We also said that Atma, a better word, is the awareness or consciousness. Atma is awareness or consciousness because of which objects exist, because of which objects are, because of which you say objects. Then, to add on to the understanding of Atma, the scriptures will use a metaphor. And it's actually called imagery. And what is imagery? Okay. So imagery is, it's a means of knowledge. It's just a tool. It's like compare and contrast, right? Two things. You compare before and you compare after. So it's a means where you can kind of see clear differences. So when I say imagery, it's just another tool to help us understand who you are, okay? Like we have, what kind of other means do we have for understanding? We have inference, right? Inference. Inference, we all know. Inference is if we look at something in this world, and we look at one thing in this world, and we say that thing is aging, yeah? By that, we can infer everything in this world also undergoes aging. If one thing undergoes aging, then everything else, by definition, will also undergo aging. And then you say, why? Well, because that thing, which is aging, it's made up of periodic table of elements, yeah? But so is everything else. So if the periodic table of elements are undergoing change in a tree, then since the entire world is also, the entire universe is nothing but periodic table of elements, then that means the entire universe is also undergoing changes, right? So this is inference. It's just a tool to help us to capture some understandings, yeah. Now, I know people like some smarties in this class will say, no, not everything undergoes aging. What about space? Space doesn't undergo changing, right? So, okay, that's true. However, you can still negate space. Okay, so yeah, there's always an exception. Okay, so what the scriptures wants to say now is Atma. How do I understand Atma more? And then it uses imagery. And so imagery, what imagery does it use? It uses the imagery of light. And light, if you have like a torchlight and you shine it onto objects, then every one of those objects becomes an object of evidence. They become evidenced, right? They become shunned, they become illumined. And so what he wants to say is Atma is like the light, because of which the objects in your mind are all very well lit. And what happens when objects are well lit? We talk about them. In fact, if you turn off that torchlight, and there's nothing to see. Now, there's no conversation, there's no complaints, there's no joys, there's nothing, because all of the objects are in pitch black. The moment you turn on that light, complaints come, happinesses come, stories come, narratives come. In other words, all of these are objects in the mind, shone on, illumined by, given light by this light, which is this awareness, which is like this light, without which there is nothing to know. There is nothing to say. There is nothing to report. There are no objects whatsoever. Okay? Therefore, so far we have said Atma is the awareness of the three states, without which the three states could not be known. Atma is the knowledge, because of which knowledge of objects takes place. Atma is Atma is consciousness or awareness, because of which I am aware of objects. And Atma is like light, because of which things, stuff in my mind is constantly shone on or illumined by, and therefore one gets to mention their pains, their joys, their sufferings, their sorrows, their achievements, their sense of worth, their sense of unworth, their sense of who they are and where they belong, and their sense of what they want to do tomorrow. These are all thoughts, objects in the mind, shone on by you, and this you is Atma, which is awareness, like light. What do you mean Atma is like light, the final truth? What do you mean that Atma is the final truth because of which everything else is known? And now the scriptures have one more model. Remember, Vedanta are models, model after model after model. They just help you to understand, okay? And this model is called Bhati, anubhati. Bhati means to shine, and anubhati means it shines after. So shine and shining after method. It's called a shining and shining after method. Bhati, anubhati. So what does this mean? Okay. See, the sun, okay, let's start with the sun. If we look up and we say, oh, the sun is self-shining, right? It is bhati. Bhati means shining. So sun is bhati. Why is the sun bhati? Because the sun is shining. Nothing else is shining on the sun, right? The sun is self-shining. Therefore, the sun is bhati. Okay, fair enough. But why is the sun shining? Oh, you say, well, because it's got it's got helium and hydrogen. No, that's not what I mean. Why is the sun shining? Because my eyes are open, okay? So it doesn't matter how strong the sun is shining. Because my eyes are open, the sun is shining. Therefore, the sun becomes anubhati and the eyes become bhati. That means the sun only shines after my eyes. The sun needs my eyes to shine, okay? So we stop at eyes. No, we don't. We go one step further. We say, actually, the eyes they shine because of the mind. So therefore, the mind becomes bhati, and the eyes or sight becomes anubhati. And then now suppose we stop at the mind and we say the mind is the final bhati. The mind is the final shining one. Okay, is this the case? Not at all, because we can show that we don't go crazy when we go to deep sleep. Because when we go to deep sleep, the mind is no longer shining. Therefore, I become the final bhati, and even the mind becomes anubhati. That means the mind only shines after me, the awareness, and I become the final bhati. Okay, you understand this? Therefore, this is called in Vedanta nyaya, logic. So there's just methods by which we arrive to what we cannot further negate. Now, suppose you argue and you say, well, but the mind, the awareness can also be anubhati. So now they argue, they say, your awareness shines after. Okay, my question is, your awareness shines after what? So if, it's like, okay, what? And then you have to give you an object. Well, your awareness shines after some object. Yeah, but that whole object was shining after you. That whole object was in your mind shining after you. So therefore, again, your mind shines after you, after the subject. Understand? The object shines after the subject. Okay? All right. So now, when the verse, see, slowly leading up into the three states. It wants to analyze the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. So how do we now apply this bhati, anubhati, onto these three states? So we have the words here, avastha, traya, sakshi. Okay. So sakshi we already analyzed, but avastha traya. So I am the right. I am the, I am the, okay, a better way to say this is I am the invariable presence, right? The invariable shining presence throughout the three states of experience. That's a much better way to say it than saying that I am the witness. So I am the Atma is the invariable shining presence throughout the three states of experience. So this means that the waking, the dreaming, and the sleeping, they all enjoy, they're all given light, they're all anubhatis in reference to you, the Bhati. Okay, why do I say this? Because it is because of you that the entire waking state is known. Like, never mind what's inside the waking state. There's good things and there are some dramas inside the waking state. Okay, there's marriage inside the waking state. There's divorce inside the waking state. There are children inside the waking state. There's moksha inside the waking state. There's ignorance inside the waking state. There are so many things inside. Never mind what's inside the waking state. The entire waking state is anubhati. The entire waking state shines after me, the one that gives it light. Therefore, no matter what happens in the waking state, no matter what happens, even death, even birth, where did your birth happen of your body? It happened in 1/3 of reality. It only happened in the waking state. And where is death going to happen? It's going to happen in the waking state. So that's going to happen in 1/3 of the total of the three. You have the waking state, where there's a dream state, and there's a deep sleep state. Everything we experience is inside one single state. And on the basis of that state, we give it absolute reality. Does that not deserve some analysis, some looking into? Okay, so what it wants to say is Atma is the invariable one in whose presence the three states and everything inside those three states is given awareness, is given evidence, is given light, and therefore it's like, right, the actor and the three roles, right? The actor is always there, just constant, and the three roles can change, can interchange. The one role is called the waking role, another role is called the dreamer role, another role is called the deep sleeper, and they're all kind of fighting, and sometimes they're very isolated. In fact, they don't fight, they're very isolated, right? They kind of have their own lives together. They never really talk to each other. Only the waker talks about the other two. The other two never talks about the waker, but all three of them depend upon the actor, who is always, see, even though the actor is through them, the actor is none of them at the same time. Okay, therefore, so this means, what does all of this mean? It means that you are not a state. You understand? You are not a state. Yes, there are three states: a waker, a dreamer, and a sleeper. They are states. There is no question about that. But whoever is giving them light, whoever is giving light to the three states, that one cannot by definition be a state. That one is just there giving light to the other three states. Therefore, you are, look at this, you therefore cannot be a special occasion. You cannot be a special occasion. Your Atma is not a special occasion. Atma is not some fourth state or, a special state, right? This is a common era, a special state, a kundalini state. What else do they have? A rising state, an uplifted state, an enlightened state. This is, these are all conversations taking place where? In the waking state. You understand? They're all, so whatever has ever happened, whatever awakening you ever got, it happened where? In the waking state. Therefore, by definition, it had nothing to do with the light that is shining the waker, shining the dreamer, and shining the sleeper. No matter what spiritual experience or whoever blessed you, it was only blessing the waker. What about the dreamer? What about the sleeper? You see, therefore, what the verse wants to communicate is these three states, and everything that happens in these three states, never mind what happens, but the fact that Atma is the invariable presence of the three states of experience means that whatever has ever happened in your waking state, in your dream state, never mind about the dream and a deep sleep, but in your waking state especially, had nothing to do with you. Because all of our concerns is always in reference to everything that's happened in 1/3 of reality. We call this Lord's creation. And Lord has given us these three states. The Lord gives us three states even to animals, to everything. And we are taking what? One state as an absolute truth. This really does deserve some looking into and considering, what's the sensibility of giving so much reality, so much concern to one single state of your experience. Okay. So that's all the verse wants to tell us. Just kind of get our minds a little bit involved, so that we're not so, into, analysis into the waker.
Whatever we are learning, it's happening in this, awakening state.
Yeah.
Isn't awakening state very important to achieve anything?
Good. Okay. Now that's a good question. Yes. Because you see, if you go into the dream, you can't do anything there. It's just so fluid, so unstable, that it's just basically playing out our unconscious stuff in the dream. And it's how the mind processes our deep-rooted, unresolved psychological issues. So for the most part, your dream is just there to keep you sane in the waking. So the waking is actually the only place where any kind of improvement happens, where moksha also takes place, where removal of ignorance takes place, where everything takes place. The other two states, Ramita, are more of a functional state. They have their function. Deep sleep, for example, gives you a break from all of this. Because, see, even those who are suppose on a trip, they're on some kind of a drug trip, right? Even if they're experiencing, suppose, ecstasy for 5 or 6 hours, 5 or 6 or 8 hours, what will all of them say eventually? I just want to be free of this. So even joy or extreme form of happiness becomes a burden after some time. And then what is it that you seek after all of that? You seek total freedom from any sense of, you could say, differentiation between you and another. Total resolution between the object and the subject. That's called Advaitam, by the way. So by definition, what is everyone seeking? Deep sleep, right? It's the ultimate. Is there anything better than deep sleep? No. Can you find anything better than deep sleep? Like a good, deep, restful sleep. Is there anything better in this world than deep sleep? Think about it. Yeah. And what is deep sleep if you analyze it? Yes, Lorena.
If you don't get deep sleep, you go crazy. Don't add that.
Look at that. So our experience shows us that, without at least a couple of hours of total freedom from this dualistic world, dualistic forms, then we will just go insane. We can't function. So sleep is really nothing but a state of Advaita. It is a state, right? Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that you, Atma, are a state, but deep sleep is a state, but it's a great, wonderful teaching tool of total freedom from all things. And so this freedom gives you some sanity to continue working out your stuff in the waking. But sometimes in the waking, what we do is we don't get enough time to work out our stuff. And since you can't really work out your stuff in the deep sleep, because that's just total freedom from all things, then what happens is the Lord has given us one more state, and that's called the dream. And what happens in the dream? Dream, as you know from your own personal experience, Ramita, what happens in a dream? A lot of stuff comes out, doesn't it? A lot of stuff from the waking that we've acquired, a lot of like people and places and, sometimes fights that we had as children with our parents will also come through, and it's just going to go on and on and on and on. Sometimes it can go on for years. And what does this mean? It means there is something unresolved in the mind that is worthy of looking into in the waking state, because that is a good indicator of something that could be holding us back from sort of enjoying a state of a tranquil, equilibrious mind in the waking state. Yeah. I, for example, had once, I think for about 5 years, it was always the same dream of in South Africa of having a argument with my dad. It was always in the same room. We were living in Johannesburg, and I was like so frustrated by this, because for 5 years, right, you have the same dream almost every single night. And I'm thinking, my God, what is up with this? What is going on? Because it's the same house. I see the same bed, the same windows, the same father, the same, right? The same Andre. It's all there. It's just the same thing. And then, of course, I didn't know what the power of the dreams are back then. So I was just sort of watching this. But now I understand that the dreams are a wonderful indicator of deep-rooted, unresolved psychological trauma, or just a kind of unresolved things that have to be looked into in your waking state. So therefore, when we wake up, then instead of just complaining, oh, I had a nightmare, look into your dream and say, what was the dream about? Who was in my dream? And then write it down if you remember. And then one can go through a little exercise. One can, for example, say, okay, I choose to release this. Can I ask the Lord for some help to help me to release this trauma? Because I don't know what it is. I don't quite understand where it comes from, but I need a little prayer. You can do a little prayer, for example. So dreams are a wonderful tool to look into our stuff that we have. Okay. And therefore, we go all the way back to the waking state where this is happening right now. And Ramita is asking me a question. In the waking state, it is a state where it is the most stable. Yeah, it's the most reliable, the most predictable. It is where the laws you can count on. You can count on gravity here to hold you down. Unlike in a dream, you can start flying up suddenly, because the dream is a world that you create. You become a Brahmaji in your own world, in your dream world. You become a creator. You become God of your own world every single night. And therefore, this world called the dream gets sculpted according to our own fancies. Is this your experience? Our own inclinations, own desires, our own narratives, our own beliefs about the world, our own perceptions, and our own thoughts and biases and prejudices. That's all the dream really is. It is your own personal world. And then this world, the waking, is what we call God's world. This is called the empirical world, the world we work with, and we commonly, uniformly, we can work and get things done. We can work out our stuff in the waking state.
What about the role of the mystic, the mysticism in the waking state and the dreaming state?
Yeah, lucid dreaming, astral projection, what have you. See, okay, there are states. I don't know how they achieve that. I'm sure some of us, I know I had a lucid dream for years when I was a young kid. You could just go, hey, this is my dream. I can fly. I can do it. I can place girls in my dream, as many girls as I want in my dream. Okay, you can do whatever you want. I don't know how that happens. The analysis here is there are 3 states in which you also have substates. Okay, we have these substates which are generated through different kind of mystical experiences, but we're not analyzing the substates. We're saying that all mini states, all substates happen either within the dream or within the waking state, because these 3 states, Bao, are what's called right, Ishvara Srishti. Okay, this word I will take later. It's called God's reality. They're called Ishvara Srishti, God's creation. So within these 3 states, we ourselves generate new states. You understand? We generate the states of Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Yoga Nidra. They call this is a state where you're neither dreaming nor sleeping. You're kind of in between. You can say this is kind of a theta delta state of the brainwaves. It doesn't matter. It's still occurring within the scope of the waking state. You understand? So this is the privilege of the person. The person has such power. Their mind is so powerful. They can even generate their own states within these 3 states. And sometimes their own states can be so intense, they override God's world. This is called a living from subjectivity, living from one's own imaginations. And this is, we can also see this happening. Conspiracy theories, the world is flat. No matter what you say to me, I'm going to say to you, the world is flat. We never landed on the moon. Right? So you get the idea. So in other words, 5G causes COVID, right? This is all a reality created by the person, which is overriding the objective reality. And it is now, how is that different from mystic states? Because mystic states are also created by one's own mind, but they are still within one of these 3 states of experience. Okay, therefore, these 3 states are what's called Ishvara Srishti, God's world, and these mystic states are called Jiva Srishti. They are generated through certain procedures, through certain practices, through yoga, and so on.
So let's call them the 3 states, the basic matrix of life and existence.
Yeah, the basic foundation of life, in which it's like, why 3 states? Why not 4? Can you think of a 4th state, by the way?
Well, in scripture they talk about Turiya as the 4th state. That was another. Sorry.
Okay. Turiya, right? Turiya. So Turiya means 4th. And they say Atma is the 4th state. No, it just means Atma is the other than the 3. So whatever is other than the 3 is the 4th. You understand? If there was 5 states other than the 5, then Atma will be called the 6th. So because there's 3 states, Atma is, Turiya, the 4th, other than the 3. Yeah, but it's interesting, right? So we cannot think of something else other than the 3 states. So we can appreciate for a moment the glory of this total intelligence, that what we are provided, we cannot your mind cannot go above total intelligence, because every mind is limited intelligence. Does meditation fall purely into the waking state? Yeah, because you see, can you meditate in the dream state? So meditation is entirely the waking state, because your body is there, and you're aware of the whole experience, and there's stability there. You're not sort of flying away here and there. There's stability in your meditation. You're meditating for 10 minutes and you know it is 10 minutes. Unlike a dream, you meditate for 10 minutes, it could be 1 second, it could be 100 years. So therefore, anything that has a sense of predictability and reliability is a waking state. Yes, including psychedelic experiences, people flying off and tripping. This is also the waking state. Okay. Okay, next week we will discuss Sat and Chit and Ananda. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.